President Trump and a lot of people who agree with him condemn globalism a lot. And I suspect, you would be the kind of epitome of a globalist. You worked for Goldman Sachs, I believe. You were a central banker. You're comfortable and lived in several countries. Is globalism, first of all, is it a thing, and is it over?
I think, look, understanding how the world works.
I understand how the world works, and how teachers, retirees, municipal employees, they pay the taxes.
Welcome back. Yeah, so welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. My guest today, Kellie Auld, as an Old Lang Syne, as she told me. And I've got to explain, first of all, why Kellie is here. Because you're saying, who's Kellie Auld? Well, Kellie Auld is somebody who had the moxie to email me and say, I'd like to discuss some issues on your show. And here's my phone number. And I called her up, and I got her husband, whose name is the same, Kellie. So it was a little confusing at first, but we eventually connected. You told me what you wanted to talk about, and I think basically, well, I hate to use that word basically. In addition to, we're going to be talking about how unlawful things become legal, especially during crises or emergencies. And here's why you're here, because I'm a great believer in listening to what my audience believes and thinks and wants to talk about. And I remember when I was a university student at Carleton here in Ottawa, and I did not grow up in Ottawa. Thank God. I grew up on Vancouver Island. I came all the way out from Comox, British Columbia, to go to journalism school a few years back. And while I was studying journalism, I wanted to do a paper on credibility in the media. And there was a local talk show host at that time. He was the top-rated talk show host in Ottawa, a guy named Ed Needham. God knows what happened to him. He went to CFRB in Toronto last I heard, and he's probably long gone now. It was quite a few years ago. But I called up Ed Needham, or his secretary, and I didn't get Ed right away. And I said, well, I'm a university student at Carleton School of Journalism. I'd like to come on your show and talk about media credibility. And I thought you were going to say, go, forget it. And Ed came on the phone, and he said, that's a good idea. He says, I think we should support our up-and-coming journalists. And so he had me on a show. We had a fantastic experience. And I never forgot that. It was one of the highlights of my time, actually, in journalism school during those years. And so that's a long way of getting around to the fact that if somebody comes to me and says, I'd like to come on your show and talk about this, I'm never somebody who says, well, forget it. Who are you? You are somebody. You've got some ideas. You're thinking. And, there's so many old Hollywood movies, and I'm a huge fan of classic film. And no, I'm not that old, but I am. When I was in high school, I was a huge fan of classic film. They thought I was way beyond my years at that time. But so many old movies, they bring somebody on a program or show and who represents sort of the average person. And I don't know if you necessarily represent the average person, Kellie, but I think your views are not just average, they're extraordinary. And I think you've really got a lot to say here. So that's a long introduction before we get into things. But just tell me a bit about yourself before we get into the guts of the program.
Sure. I worked with the RCMP for about 20 years. I was a communications specialist, I guess you'd say. I did a lot of teaching, instructing. I used to work with the recruit field. I was actually what they call a civilian member of the RCMP. My husband was a regular member. That's how we met. Anyway, then because of all of the transfers to follow my husband's career, my transfers were limited because I was in a specialized area. So I went back to university, I went into teaching, and basically fell into human resources. We lived in Kitimat up north. I'm sure that people have heard of that now because of LNG. But we lived up there for a while. He was the commanding officer at the detachment. And I started a consulting business. And it really fell into, I worked with a lot of the big industry up there. Then we got transferred down here to Kamloops. I taught at the university for a short period of time. And then I started my own consulting business. And I worked predominantly in human resources types policies. I worked in employee relations. I developed policies. I did a lot of training of investigations. I trained law offices, actually, in some cases. And I think as a result of that, where's the evidence? And that's just kind of how my brain started to think. And when I started seeing, shifts in Canada, the way the homelessness, things that we're really, really seeing today, because things have really ramped up. The division among people, because divided we fall. So I thought, you know what, we've got to speak about this, because one thing I do know is silence is consent. So here I am, and I've done hours and hours and hours of research, and I've learned a lot about how Canada operates, and we have shifted entirely from where the people were actually in charge, let's say, and the politicians delivered our wishes. And now it's completely inverted, where basically we're expected to obey.
Yes.
So, it's unfortunate, because there's amazingly good people in politics, but I think, unfortunately, they don't have a lot of power anymore.
No, they don't. That's a great introduction, Kelly. And before we get to a letter that you've written, as we'll base most of our conversation on what you say in this letter, and we'll go take it from there. But I just wanted to show a few clips for you. The first two will be a little BC centric, and like I said, that's my province. I grew up in BC, and I miss BC every day of my life. I grew up on the ocean. Mm-hmm. Literally yards away from the waterfront, and in Comox. My dad was an Air Force officer at the base there. I ended up being an Air Force officer at the same base for 6 wonderful years. Probably the best time of my life. But I miss BC, but it's gone so crazy. Not people like you, not Kamloops necessarily, not Edgewood, BC, where the
Kamloops is crazy too.
But it's just Vancouver is just like a communist city now. And in Victoria, it's always been a bit left of center, but now it's basically Marxist. And I just really am so sad for my province, the way it's gotten. But I'm heartened by one thing, and that's the one BC party leader, Dallas Brody. I've had her on my show twice, and I can't think of anything she says I disagree with. And I really think she's just a marvelous leader, but I hope she becomes premier someday. And I'm thinking, if Danielle Smith can do it in Alberta, I think Dallas Brody could do it in BC. I think she'd be a marvelous premier. But I want you to listen to this clip from last week and just tell me what you think of her response here. Absurd. But I don't understand why so many people just think it's something we have to do. Because if you look at it in starker terms, I don't see any difference between granting people occupation rights of property or houses or apartments or beachfront property, whatever, on the basis of their race. And what used to happen in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, where Jewish people were evicted from their properties, their houses, their apartments, because they weren't considered citizens, and other Germans were considered more equal than they were. And they had a right to take over their property, their houses, their apartments on the basis strictly of ethnicity and race. In those cases, they called themselves Aryans, and they considered Jewish people to be less than citizens. So that was the law. I don't see any difference here at all. I've been criticized for that. People have called me a racist for saying that. I'm sorry, but if you think Aboriginal title is not racist, there's something wrong with the way you're thinking.
Well, one BC, and we've always held this, is that we want to get rid of all race-based laws in British Columbia, because we have many different races living here. You could imagine, what if we started giving this to this race and that race? And they can say, yes, well, this is steeped in traditional, the original people of British Columbia and so on, but it's not working anymore. And it's certainly not working for the people even on these reserves. And I agree with you. And we're also, even Prime Minister Trudeau, the elder, with Jean Chrétien in 1969, saw the trouble that was coming with the white paper, and the details of it are not important, but essentially they were saying we can't have two classes of citizen in Canada. They could see, and he was, a liberal, and he was saying we can't do this.
And wow, what common sense. I just find that to be so commonsensical, so obvious. But like I say, I've been talking this way now for 20 years. Before Dallas Brody even got involved in politics. I'm sure glad she did decide to do so. But over the years, people have called me racist for thinking that. And I'm thinking, how ridiculous is that? Because you're the one that's racist if you think people should have special status, special rights based on their race or ethnicity. I want equality under the law. That's the way Canada used to operate. Mm-hmm. Equality under the law that we had, and we were colorblind. We didn't say to people, oh, you're black or your skin color is different, therefore you should be treated differently. No, we said we're all equal. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, where your ancestors came from, what your race identification is. We're all equal under the law. That's the Canada I grew up in. To some extent, it was even vanishing at that point. But I think it's basically gone. I mean, how do you feel about all of this race-based
Well, I agree
thinking?
completely with what Dallas said and with what you're saying. I don't think we should be separated by, any of that. I mean, the things that are going on in the schools, people are being literally punished because they, for instance, the 215 alleged bodies. Well, I can tell you, David, in my work, I worked a lot with First Nations people, and she is quite right. The chiefs and this is not in all cases, some reserves are quite good, but a lot of them, the people who live on the reserves do not have a good life. A lot of them don't even have, still don't have appropriate drinking water. They don't have good housing. So where's all that money going? And, we have a right to be angry about it, but I don't blame the First Nations people. I blame our so-called government. You're absolutely right. We no longer live in the Canada we used to have. And that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because here's a little quote that I thought of. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that was said by Lord Acton in 1887. And here we are. And, this is what I see wrong. So this, I guess what I really wanted to get across, David, is that this, I think, is really our final chance to bring back some of what Canada was, to put people back in charge. When I talked to you a bit about that inverted triangle, that's where we are today. And I really encourage people to start speaking out. I'm more than happy to share letters and templates and emails. I'm going to be published now in Epoch Times and in Druthers. And, we just need to start speaking out and addressing some of the really important things. Harper brought in the Omnibus bill, and we're currently looking at how that works. So this new bill, Division 5, C15, was in the budget bill, nothing to do with the budget. But basically what it's doing is giving all the power. They've got 3 years. I'll tell you actually what it says. It allows ministers to exempt people on entire industries from federal laws for up to 3 years without Parliament voting. You don't put structural governance changes inside a budget bill. But that's how democracy erodes. And it's just one thing at a time. And each of them have contributed to this administrative state that we now live in.
I think that is very, very profound. And I don't blame First Nations people either. Blame them for what? For living in poverty?
Not exactly. I know. It wouldn't be so bad if their lives improved as a result, but they don't. And all it's doing is creating more division. And like I said earlier, the division, that's all intentional. The LGBTQ, and did you know that George Soros and, well, you do know because I heard you talk, That First Nations group, Carney knew perfectly well. They're financed by Soros and Rockefeller. He knew perfectly well they're not legitimate BC First Nations people. They're an activist group.
Oh, you're talking about that phony chief that
Yes, and they
represents
want BC to be a provincial park.
yeah, amazing. That wasn't what's it called? Coastal nations.
Something like that.
It's
yeah.
not even they don't represent a single Indigenous person. They represent a lot of activists in the U.S. that are funding them. They represent the Rockefeller Foundation and what used to be called Tides, but they don't represent any Indigenous people. What kills me is that they pretend to do this. They bring in the money, and of course it doesn't get to any of the people who really need it. It stays in this little collective of woke individuals who keep preaching their gospel, and it's all nonsense. And Mark Carney cozied up to these people, I believe deliberately, and I don't want to go on ad nauseum about it, but he cozied up to these people so he could say, oh, First Nations don't want this pipeline. I don't really want to transgress their opinion and their thoughts on this, so maybe we shouldn't build one. And it's the worst kind of excuse, especially since it's not even based on reality. It's not based on the opinions of real people.
Well, the problem he could override that at any time, David, and he chooses not to. Like, he talks out of both sides of his mouth. I mean, remember during the election, the English debate, and he said China is our biggest security threat. And who's he buddying up with now? China. So what does that tell you? And that's where it wasn't that. It was a number of things, as I say, over the years. But particularly now, I think he's made it perfectly clear we will never be a democratic country again unless we take this last opportunity to really shout and let our voices be heard. And I don't mean piling out onto the streets. I mean, a letter writing campaign, not on the symptoms like the homelessness and all those things I'm talking about. We need to attack the idea that we are now in this administrative state and we don't accept it. And so, like I say, I'm more than happy to share that with people. I think we're at a time crunch. We don't have a lot of time left, David. And being silent is definitely going to end it for us. That's just not an option anymore. And the other thing this may sound extreme, but I really encourage people, because it's going to be a long process. That's not going to happen overnight. The change didn't happen overnight, nor will getting us back. But you know what? Put aside some cash. I'm not kidding. Start looking at some prepping channels. Start, getting food. When you go to the grocery store, buy a couple little extra items. Those things are going to be tough for us moving forward. And I find it interesting how we're told that, we've got to be prepared for tough times. But Mr. Bankroll there, everything he does, everything he touches benefits his personal investments. And I find that pretty repulsive too.
Yeah, absolutely. I better get to my next clip. We could be talking for hours.
Yeah, sorry.
It's no, don't.
I'll talk until the cows come home. So
that's what you're here for. But I want to show you a clip here before I do. I want to ask you what was your reaction? It was a week ago today, almost to the hours, 11 a.m. Eastern time, that we found out, and thank God that the Federal Appeal Court was not going to agree with an appeal from the Liberal government that the invocation of the Emergencies Act was inappropriate, unjustified, and unconstitutional. So they rejected that appeal and went further. And I went into this in detail on a previous show that they actually said it did violate the charter rights of these protesters and their supporters. So I got Chris Barber on the show as soon as he could possibly do so. We talked for a good 25 minutes about it. He was a little bit surprised that it came down in his favor, but it's going to be, I think, very consequential for the Freedom Convoy supporters in terms of their desire to sue the government for what they did to them, and perhaps even defend themselves from a totally ridiculous lawsuit coming from the aggrieved residents of Ottawa who couldn't stand the honking and the exhaust fumes.
Yeah, it's very stressful.
And so I think it's going to have some effect on that too. But overall, I think a lot of people just said, hey, finally, like the judiciary, the establishment judges came down on our side. And they said this was a gross violation of charter rights. And before I get to the clip here of Katie Precedent of Universal Ostrich Farms describing her reaction to it, what was your reaction to this?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction, but the problem is a precedent yet again was set where's the consequence, so look at all, I had 2.5 pages listed at one time of all of the scandals that were attached to Trudeau Jr. And what came of it? Nothing, and the Ethics Commission, the problem is, like right now, I think Carney is in well over 100 conflicts of interest. But the thing is, they assign those people, so they're not going to bite the head. It's just like the media. Like, they control all of that now. And those are very, very dangerous signs. So I think it's awesome that it was deemed inappropriate, because it certainly was. It never followed the proper rules of how emergencies should be dealt with. That completely bypassed Parliament. They didn't vote on it. They didn't vote on COVID. They didn't none of that. So it was just directed. So yeah, I have a real problem with it. But the thing is, David, where does the money come from to compensate these people that were harmed? And they certainly were. I don't deny that for 1 second. Actually, I refused a COVID shot, and I refused to wear the mask and all the rest of it. And I was basically ostracized from society. I had friends turn against me. I had family that walked away. Like, they weren't going to tolerate it. So I know what it feels like to be ostracized. And what they went through was absolutely unlawful. It was legal. Same with Katie's situation with the ostrich farm. What they're doing is legal, but it sure as heck isn't lawful.
Well, let's listen to how Katie responded. I did an interview over the weekend, was it? No, I'm getting weekdays and weekends confused because I'm working 7 days a week.
Well, when you're retired every day.
I had Katie on the show with former Agriculture Minister Jerry Ritz and veterinarian Dr. Jeff Wilson. And we were talking about a lot of things, but this included, and I thought her comments on the Emergencies Act decision was quite interesting. He alluded to the fact that the Federal Appeal Court, just about 15 hours after the CFIA announced it was going to uphold a $10,000 fine, the appeal court actually sided with the Freedom Convoy and against the appeal from the Liberal government. It was initiated by the Trudeau government, continued under Mark Carney. But of course, this was an appeal of the decision, the declaration in January 2024 by Judge Richard Mosley, who said the invocation of the Emergencies Act was inappropriate, unreasonable, unjustified, and I think potentially contrary to the Charter of Rights. But it's interesting. If you look at what the Federal Appeal Court said, they said it definitely infringed on the Charter. And I went through the fine print of this decision because I was interested to see, would they actually go farther than Justice Mosley? And they did. They said it infringed upon the Charter against crucial Charter rights, and specifically fundamental freedom, that it violated our fundamental freedom to thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media communication. So when you say, and legal rights as well, this is what the judgment said. So my question first to Katie is that are you emboldened by the fact that this decision came out saying that this kind of government overreach was contrary to the Charter of Rights, was potentially illegal? And obviously you're seeing the application to what happened to you with government overreach at the farm. So are you looking at this and saying this is a golden opportunity to demonstrate the CFIA acted not just improperly, not just unjustly, but contrary to the Constitution, contrary to the Charter of Rights?
Absolutely. It was Miracle Monday, and because I was like, Miracle Friday was so great last week. I did a video because it was just so exciting to see one little step in the right direction when we need to uphold our Charter of Rights. And I was going through, it's like section 12, protection against cruel and unusual treatment. Well, there's section 12. I mean, hours of gunfire. Our animals were dying in panic. The abuse of, our search and seizure too. I mean, our warrants, they overtook not just our property, but they were taking over my aunt and uncle's neighboring property. All of a sudden, they just expanded these zones and took over our properties and kicked us off our land. It was so exciting because it is hope that they set one of the biggest precedents. And thank you for that, because that precedent can be used in our case. And we're going to go full force with it, that we're going to make sure that this never happens to anyone again. So it gave a lot of hope to us, and everything that not just we have been through, but everybody that witnessed it and everybody that was on our farm at the time as well.
And I'll leave it there because I think this is absolutely fascinating, and it completely dovetails with what you're saying to us this morning, is that something can be legal, but it's unlawful. In fact, a lot of the behavior from the CFIA was absolutely illegal. Mm-hmm. The so-called cleanup at the farm was absolutely illegal.
David, it was
contrary
legal
to laws.
No, it was legal, but it was not lawful. So what happens is how Canada has shifted. So the executive power, actually, what a lot of people don't realize, these people were not elected, but they are making all the rules. The PMO and the cabinet, they dictate. And then the administrative state, we've got agencies, regulators, tribunals, experts, delegated authorities, and directives. They all come from people external. And now what's shifted as well, having worked in the RCMP, the police went from independent law enforcement to policy enforcement. So the chiefs are dependent on political approval. You get these emergency orders that are treated as law without going through the appropriate process. When Katie talked about precedent, there is the issue. So every time these things occur and there's no consequence for it, it now becomes practice. And that's what people have to understand. I think once we start to really understand the framework, then we can tackle how to fix it. Federal and provincial joint operational priorities override the local judgment, and crowd control policing and everything against dissent instead of proper enforcement. Like, we all see that. I think it was Ontario, and correct me if I'm wrong, where the provincial police actually, because of the crime and the break-ins to the homes and everything, they said, just leave your car keys right out on your front porch and let them take it.
It was.
Is that accurate?
That's entirely accurate. A police officer recommended that just leave your keys at the front door, and it'll solve all kinds of problems. There won't be any necessary home invasion. You won't have to fight off a home invasion or an intruder in your house. You just take your car, and that's problem solved. But that's how they're thinking, or that's how they're not thinking. But I think in terms of legality, I mean, the CFI did break the law many, many, many times during this operation. But I think what I would agree with you is that, okay, it's legal only in the sense that nobody's being charged. Because the police are in the government's pocket. And they clearly were. They watched the CFIA abuse these ostriches. They have watched them demonstrate animal cruelty. They watched them violate several laws as they removed the ostriches from the farm after the massacre. RCMP did nothing. So therefore, they didn't really break the law, did they? Because nobody was charged. So I think we're saying the same thing, but
we are. But I guess this is where I'm saying, like, okay, so right now, like the omnibus bill, it's got to be, we have to repeal that because there's way too much going on. Like, what happens is they get such a wide influx of things, they can't properly scrutinize these bills. And consequently, some of them that really should not be going through get passed simply because they can't possibly, in an omnibus setup, deal with them. This one that I was talking about, that has to be nipped in the bud immediately. It has not yet passed, but that's the Division 5 C-15. I couldn't believe, like, Canada's just no longer governed by Parliament. It's not governed the way that we have grown up to believe and accept. And we have to make sure that people alert every single MP, not just their own, but all of them, like the jig is up. We see how this has collapsed and we want it fixed, like the preamble of the Canadian Charter of Rights. I mean, the supremacy of God, like it's not about religion. It's about doing things that don't harm other people. It's about doing things that are, according to the wishes of the people. We're not there anymore, David.
No, we're not.
And a government that is as big as it is, it's incompetent. Like, what government department can you actually, that if you contact CRA and you ask them a question, did you know that 85% of the time your answer will not be accurate? And yet you have no recourse if you follow whatever direction they give you. Like, it's just insane.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get to your letter here because we're midway through. Although there's no time limit here. It's not like they're going to yank me off.
No, I understand why. Yeah. You're a busy guy.
But I want to have a look at your letter here, and this is the only way I could really get it up. Where is it? There we go. How Canada slipped into an administrative state. I find this to be very interesting. For many Canadians, the last several years have felt disorientating. Rules appeared without parliamentary debate. Rights seemed suspended without explanation. Policy shifted overnight, often delivered through press conferences rather than elected representatives. These are not isolated, quote, policy disagreements, unquote. They are symptoms of a deeper structural problem. Canada has quietly evolved into an administrative state. This shift did not happen suddenly. It was not the result of a single prime minister or a single crisis. Canada's drift towards executive-driven governance began decades ago and has accelerated with each successive government, regardless of party. Understanding how we arrived here is essential if we hope to restore democratic accountability. So can you comment on that one?
And that's where I'm talking. State. Right. So the administrative state is where I was talking about, and I think I showed you this triangle. So at one time, the people, as I say, were the ones who were the source of lawful authority. And we would, of course, vote for our MPs, and they would, develop the laws and everything. And they would have debates and discuss whether or not they were appropriate, but they created the law. So anyway, over time, and then the executive carried out the parliamentary will. And the public service, of course, they worked for us and administered what Parliament had expressly authorized, okay? But now this has shifted where we are in a top-down, regulation-driven government. And that is what I mean by administrative state. So now public service agencies, as I mentioned, they can be external. We didn't vote them in. They're unelected. But they draft the rules and the regulations, and then the cabinet and the PMO's office issues the directives, and then the parliament, like they'll often remark on it and whatnot, but they don't initiate anything anymore. And because of the omnibus bills and the fact that everything is hidden, well, it's not hidden, it's there, but it's just so much. Like, you can imagine, like if you've got pages and pages, I've got about 2,500 pages, and I'm having a hard time, putting this together. I'm building out a binder and a course, but, and I'm struggling. So I can well imagine, there's no way they can scrutinize all these bills. And then the people are just expected to comply. And a lot of it is because we don't understand that we still currently have the ability to act within law. We can say no. They make it extremely difficult. I mean, look at COVID. Oh, no, you don't have to do this, but you won't get on a bus. You won't get on a train. You won't, so basically you're restricted from life. And that's what they do to us. So we have to be very, very strong And we have to say no. We have to stand up to this power and say, no, I'm not doing it. It's unlawful. You're creating harm. And identify, what that is. Yes, the charter still exists in Canada. So let's use it. And Katie's lawyers will no doubt bring up articles of the charter.
Well, I completely concur with your analysis of the Omnibus bill, because this has been a very bad habit in the U.S. Congress for decades now. And there's a spending bill in front of the House of Representatives that essentially cements everything they had their big fight over last October, November, December, when the government shut down over some of these so-called principles. And everything the Democrats wanted, they're getting in this massive spending bill, and the Republicans are going along with it because nobody notices. It's like all of these little details are completely immersed into this massive, 1,200 page bill, which even the congressmen and women, the senators, don't actually read. They don't get through it all. They don't even know what's in the bill that they're voting on. They just want to get it through because somebody's going to get what they want from the bill. So in order for that senator or that House of Representative member to get what they want, they got to agree to everything in the bill. And so it's just, it amazes me that this has not been stopped, but maybe it doesn't, because I think ultimately they like it this way until the whole thing collapses, implodes, as it will ultimately if you keep spending money in this fashion. But I think we need to stop this in Canada before it's too late. But I don't think Mark Carney wants to. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's where, we need to have coordinated action. I thought, it's fine to do all the complaining and, all the YouTube channels. I really applaud all of you for the work that you're doing. But to me right now, okay, we're aware. What do we do? So we have to have coordination. We have to get small groups together. We have to strengthen our networks. And even stuff like get to know your neighbors, make friends with them, speak to them, because the division that they created during COVID, do you remember they wanted neighbors to report on a fellow neighbor that wasn't wearing a mask or whatever the case? We don't want to go there anymore. Reach out to other freedom groups, like each of them have their own fight, and I understand it and I support them. But now let's focus. Let's all be together. Yes. And let's make sure that we're all reaching out and giving the same message. MPs do track volume. So me by myself, that's not going to get anywhere. But if we get hundreds or even that, you get a dozen people that and get all of them to sign this letter. Individually, they have to send them in individually, not one letter with, because that doesn't have the weight. They need to get flooded with these letters. We can't remain silent. We've got to support alternative media. So if I can't afford to contribute, money to you, I can still like and subscribe and, really get people listening to what we're saying.
Exactly.
Right? Because the silence is killing us, David.
Now you go on in your letter to describe something that I experienced when I worked on Parliament Hill. After I left the military, I went to Parliament Hill to try to fix things. Didn't quite happen.
You're one of the good guys.
So you talk about parliamentary democracy to executive management, and your point here is that it's gone from elected politicians to prime minister's office. Mm-hmm. These are the backroom people that make the decisions, and they literally do. And I don't care if you're talking about Justin Trudeau or Mark Carney or even Stephen Harper.
Yeah,
these people go around to MPs' offices and they intimidate them. They intimidate MPs to vote in a certain manner, to make speeches about certain things, or not to make speeches about other matters, or else something bad is going to happen to them. I don't mean it's nothing violent, but they might lose their critic's position, or they might lose a position on a committee they like, or they'll be punished in some way. And this is how this goes on. And I think, when precedent becomes practice, I think this is very profound. One of the most troubling aspects of this shift is the creation of a precedent. Each time a government bypasses Parliament in the name of urgency or practicality, it establishes a new normal. The next cabinet inherits these tools and expands them. Precedent becomes practice. Practice becomes structure. Structure becomes political reality. And reality becomes increasingly difficult for citizens to manage. Now, I'll go back to that one more time, but just if you could elaborate on that shortly, briefly.
Okay, now I don't have the letter in front of me, so I'm not going to remember. What specifically did you?
Okay, you're talking about precedent becoming reality now.
Oh, right. Okay. So
Yeah.
as an example, the situation, and I'm going to use the ostrich farm because it's a perfect example, actually. And it's one that I know you're very familiar with and fighting for. And I think I did tell you I've written letters and they were responded to. But it wasn't. So what happened is everything they did was legal. Okay. It was all given to us by directives, by people, that they're just doing what their orders are. They're following orders, sir. And what happened was, of course, her rights were violated. So that was unlawful. So now she's going to have to go back and personally fight it. But the problem becomes that precedent, if she doesn't win, and that's where the Emergencies Act and all of these court cases that are going forward, if they don't win, then a precedent's been set, and that precedent then becomes practice. So just a real simple example, when the Constitution first came out, there were subjects there where where Quebec had to agree. They didn't. So people will argue, well, then we don't really have a constitution. And I believed that for a long time too. But the reality is, no, we still functioned as though they were part of that. And that because it was practiced for all these years, our constitution is real and they are indeed part of it, even though there are portions they didn't consent to. Does that make sense? Oh, looks like I've lost you. I think I lost you there. Did you catch anything that I said?
No, I caught everything, actually.
Okay.
It's as I shared with you earlier, I think in an email, we had a catastrophic internet collapse last night. I was right in the middle of a rare evening broadcast. I do one a week with my friend Nico from Montreal, and I was right in the middle of talking about something, and everything collapsed, and it was terrible. We didn't get it back till this morning.
I know we're so lost without it, eh? That scares me with the whole digital thing. Like, exactly. I won't go down there because we'll be here for 2 hours. But
let's go back to your. Let's go back to your letter and your concluding points, and I'll leave it up this time. I apologize for not leaving it up.
No problem. That's me.
You can actually see it. We're talking.
My brain is on a a little hamster wheel.
Yeah. Okay. So visible symptoms of a deeper problem. Your concluding remarks. These are all in bold. So candidates feel this shift intuitively because of its symptoms and are all around us. Symptoms are all around us. Number one, mandates and regulations announced before parliamentary scrutiny. Exactly. Number two, omnibus bills bearing major policy changes and hundreds of pages of unrelated text. Exactly. Number three, cabinet secrecy increasing. Number four, courts deferring to expert opinion, quote unquote, from the same bureaucracies whose decisions are under review. Local police forces treating political directives as law. Exactly. Media outlets financially dependent on federal subsidies and regulatory frameworks. That's where we are. I don't get a cent. Citizens censored or labeled misinformation risk, quote unquote, for disagreeing with government approved narrative. Wow. I don't know if I could have gotten a more accurate or comprehensive list from anybody else who watches the media. I applaud you for this, Kellie. It's really good. So
I see this is the structural breakdown, and that's what I really, really feel compelled. I have children and grandchildren, and sadly I don't see them anymore. But I'm still going to fight for them because I still love them. And, I want everyone who has children and grandchildren, think about them. Like we've had a wonderful life They will never have the life we had unless we start to speak out. Like I kept quiet for a long time, David, because I didn't see the point. And then I thought, you know what? I'm guilty. I'm guilty because I'm shutting my mouth. And I know for a fact that means consent. I worked in common law daily. I understand it. And I know that silence is acquiescence. Like the unions, the labor board, all of those, they all acted unlawfully. I would, if I were still an employee, and I'm not and haven't been for years, and particularly if I had a union, I'd sue their ass off. Oh, am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, you can say that. You can get away. I want to highlight three things myself here, which I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
The mandates, exactly. They got away with these mandates saying this is the law. They were unlawful. Cabinet secrecy. This is a huge issue right now because Carney recently passed legislation in the budget that essentially gives cabinet ministers the right to hide information from the public, from the media, and even to be exempt from prosecution if they are breaking the law. And this went by. And why? Go to your other point. Why is this not being reported except from new media, independent media? Because media outlets financially dependent on federal subsidies. Yeah.
Exactly right.
So what kind of criticism are you going to get about this when they say, well, we really don't want to lose that 120 grand we're getting every year or every month, in some cases from the government for this, it's helping us pay the salary. So I guess we'll just be quiet about it.
Well, I think like one of them that you touched on, the cabinet secrecy, that is the very bill I'm talking about, Division 5, C15. It's in the budget, has nothing to do with the budget, does it? But the reality is it's an omnibus bill. And it has not yet passed. And that is why one of them that we need to write about, the jig is up. We know we're in an administrative state and we do not comply. We do not consent because we still have that little bit of time left where we can speak. And secondly, we need to write letters continually about these bloody things that are hidden in omnibus bills in a budget bill that has nothing to do with the budget. The drug and health food agencies too, they're trying to quash any natural food products. And that also was buried in a budget bill. What does that have to do with the budget? So I see these have to be addressed. And we need to speak to that. We need to speak to it.
And you end in this letter by talking about the fact that they are censoring independent journalists, well, actually anybody, with disinformation, misinformation. And as Parliament resumes on Monday, on the 26th, I know one of the first orders of business is going to be Bill C8 and C9, the censorship bills, which have gone way farther than anything else. And Sean Fraser, our blessed Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada, has promised to reintroduce the Online Harms Act, which I've been predicting will be renamed the Online Safety Act, as it is in the UK. Sounds so simple and so innocuous as the Online Safety Act. And this, of course, is the bill Justin Trudeau introduced that is going to actually introduce thought crimes in the Canadian law. So somebody can suspect me of thinking something hateful, whatever that means, of course.
Well, that's the other thing.
Anybody's interpretation. But I can have the cops at my door for something I haven't even said yet because somebody thinks I might say it.
And who interprets all of that stuff, David? Who interprets it? They're like, who determines what hate is? Oh, it's based on emotion now. Well, isn't that insane? Or like you say, we might have a disagreement. And so you phone the cops and you say, she yelled at me and I think she's going to come and break in and whatever your story might be, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, a lawful system, you have a right to defend yourself, but that's going to be stripped. We're not going to have that anymore. So this is why I really wanted to reach out to you. And again, I thank you so much for even allowing me to speak. But I just want to make it so abundantly clear, David, we're not going back to the Canada we knew unless we start sounding our voices strong and consistent messaging.
I think you're absolutely correct, and we can't overstate.
Seriously, I don't know what else we can do.
Because I have been on. I don't think there's a day has gone by that I haven't talked about the censorship and surveillance bills.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting enough attention from the average Canadian. They're not getting enough attention from the official opposition.
No.
There's been a few voices. Andrew Lawton has been very good on it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking a couple of other Conservative MPs have been talking about it on their private YouTube broadcasts. But there hasn't been a lot of attention in the House of Commons to it. I mean, it's fine to talk about food banks, fine to talk about jail, not bail, and safe streets and safe communities. If we lose our freedom of speech, none of that really matters.
Exactly. And you're exactly right. And this is why I say all those things are serious. There's no question about it. But they are symptoms of a sick system. So just like I said, you go to a doctor, he gives you a pill, he or she or they give you a pill, and off you go. Well, okay, great. You've treated the symptom. There's going to be side effects to that too, right? You don't just get the pill. Oh, well, now you've got to take this pill to offset the side effects of that pill. Okay, well, you're treating the symptoms, but what's the problem? What is really at the root of this? And that's what I did with all my research. And like I say, it's how I learned that these precedents, because they were not dealt with, they were set, and now they've become what we live with. And I'd also be very, very cautious of the language they use. Security. It's always I don't want daddy government to babysit me. I'm an adult. Thank you.
Well, yeah. And, as John Carpay of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms has said many times as a guest on this show, I don't want John Carpay deciding what's hateful. I don't want David Creighton deciding what's hateful any more than I want Mark Carney or some judge determining, that's hate speech. Why? I just say so.
That's right.
It just feels right. That's not the country I want to live in, because it means I basically have to self-censor everything I say.
Yeah.
And to some extent, we already do that on social media because we're worried about being thrown off.
Well, they set examples, right? There's your precedent as well. Exactly. Like they'll set examples. And I mean, I knew Dr. Hoff, when I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, he's out of BC. And he questioned why he's got these people that are now having side effects to the jab and the, interior health here. Oh, misinformation. He's a witness. He can see this. It's not misinformation. And the hell that he went through, that poor man. But you know what? At the end of the day, he had the evidence to support. And that's what we have right now. I've got a ton of evidence, and I am more than happy if people want samples of letters, emails, editor. Of course, they'll want to put it in their own words, but I'm more than happy to share because I'm really believing we are in our last chance.
I think you might be entirely accurate. And
well, I'm just basing that now on the new world order, and we're not going back. And I'm just basing it on what came out of Carney's own mouth.
Yeah, which was frightening. And
it was. And remember, like you said, Parliament sits again on Monday. We need to give them the power back too, to work on our behalf. That's missing now. We don't have it.
No, we have lost, as you say, our parliamentary authority, the authority of elected politicians, and it's actually frightening. I want to conclude here with something a little funny, because sometimes we can forget that we need to keep our sense of humor. That's what they hate most, by the way, Kelly, is when you make fun of them, and that's why they want to shut down these memes on X and social media, because they hate to be ridiculed.
Yeah.
And what they're doing, of course, whether it's Mark Carney or Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron, these people are clowns running a clown show, a gong show. And they hate people to point that out, how stupid they are, how ridiculous they look. I love this moment from Donald Trump's speech at Davos this week. I think it was, I got up to watch, not only to watch it, I had to get a column done almost exactly at the same time he was stunned.
I know,
Or
like
even
you have
events.
3 hours of sleep and you're lucky.
You know, so I got the column out within a half an hour of Donald Trump finishing this, and they posted it in a timely manner. I hate it when you meet your end of the bargain. It takes them 7 hours to post the column,
Yeah.
but they got it up in a timely way. But I love Donald Trump's comments here about windmills.
I
Oh,
always say nuclear will take 3 weeks, but most aren't going that. They're going oil and gas. They're even going coal in some cases. Because of my landslide election victory, the United States avoided the catastrophic energy collapse which befell every European nation that pursued the Green New Scam, perhaps the greatest hoax in history. The Green New Scam, windmills all over the place, destroy your land, destroy your land. Every time that goes around, you lose $1,000. You're supposed to make money with energy, not lose money. Here in Europe, we've seen the fate that the radical left tried to impose on America. They tried very hard. Germany now generates 22% less electricity than it did in 2017, and it's not the current chancellor's fault. He's solving the problem. He's going to do a great job. But what they did before he got there, I guess that's why he got there. And electricity prices are 64% higher. The United Kingdom produces just 1/3 of the total energy from all sources that it did in 1999. Think of that, 1/3. And they're sitting on top of the North Sea, one of the greatest reserves anywhere in the world, but they don't use it. And that's one reason why their energy has reached catastrophically low levels with equally high prices. High prices, very low levels. Think of that, 1/3. And you're sitting on top of the North Sea, and they like to say, well, you know, that's depleted. It's not depleted. It's got 500 years. They haven't even found the oil. The North Sea is incredible. They don't let anybody drill. Environmentally, they don't let them drill. They make it impossible for the oil companies to go. They take 92% of the revenues. So the oil companies say, we can't do it. They came to see me. Is there anything you can do? I want Europe to do great. I want UK to do great. Sitting on one of the greatest energy sources in the world, and they don't use it. In fact, their electricity prices have soared 139%. There are windmills all over Europe. There are windmills all over the place, and they are losers. One thing I've noticed is that the more windmills a country has, the more money that country loses and the worse that country is doing. China makes almost all of the windmills, and yet I haven't been able to find any wind farms in China. Did you ever think of that? It's a good way of looking at it. They're smart. China's very smart. They make them, they sell them for a fortune. They sell them to the stupid people that buy them, but they don't use them themselves. They put up a couple of big wind farms, but they don't use them. They just put them up to show people what they could look like. They don't spin. They don't do anything. They use a thing called coal mostly. But China goes with the coal. They go with oil and gas. They're starting to look at nuclear a little bit, and they're doing just fine. They make a fortune selling the windmills, though, and I think really that's one that they wouldn't be surprised if it stopped. They are shocked that it continues to go. They're very friendly with me. They're shocked that people continue to buy those damn things. They killed the birds. They ruin your landscapes. Other than that, I think they're fabulous, by the way. Stupid people buy them.
I love it. You know, he's talking to the very stupid people he's referring to in his speech. These are all the movers and shakers of Europe who have been heavily invested in the Green New Scam, as Donald Trump calls it, green energy, which of course cannot power a modern society. And they all know that. It is just, they're all living a lie together. They're all delusional together. And Donald Trump calls them out, and the crowd is completely silent. They can't believe he's saying this. But, you know, I would love to see a Canadian politician have the moxie, the balls, or, well, I probably shouldn't use the latter phrase because it might exclude some of the more courageous female politicians we have in this country. But I would love to see a Canadian politician with the courage to stand up and say something like that at the WEF. And I know I'm not going to hear that anytime soon from your
No.
politics.
And, you know, the other thing is, let's not forget a lot of the stuff that mainstream avoids, right? I mean, Carney identifies as European. He's outright said that. He's trying to align us with Europe, which is basically going bankrupt. It makes no sense. He's trying to align us with China, and he's saying that they are a like-minded partner. Well, they violate human rights all the time. They use slave labor. They have dirty forms of energy, as Trump was just talking about, and yet they're like-minded. Like, all they are is power hungry. I guess that's what they have in common. They love to rule and dictate. And I don't know if you've ever read Mark Carney's book, Values. I glimpsed, I went through it, not really closely, but certainly pointed out a few things. He admires Karl Marx.
Yes.
Remember Trudeau? Oh, he loves China because of the control they have over their people. Why are we not listening to these things?
Well, that's precisely. And when Dallas Brody was on the show, she referenced the fact she'd read Values before Mark Carney, long before Mark Carney became prime minister. And she said, I hope this guy never leads Canada because he's dangerous.
You know, the second I heard his name, I said to my husband, we're done. You know, Trudeau was a real absolute mess. And what I find really ironic is, you know, Trudeau was, everybody disliked him. They wanted him gone, even his own party members. And yet Carney was advising Trudeau.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Since 2020, I believe it was 2020. It's Carney who told him to freeze the bank accounts. It's Carney who told him to call the Emergencies Act. And, you know, and yet people don't know that. They voted in just a much more brilliant, because let's face it, if Trudeau had a brain cell, it would probably die of loneliness. But anyway, that's just the way it goes. But anyway, my plea really is, please, people, please don't remain silent, because the Canada we knew, our children and grandchildren will never know unless we speak.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Kelly. And that's probably a very opportune and a very appropriate place to end this interview. And we've gone over an hour. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a pleasure listening to you in this discourse. We need to listen to people. And we don't need the same talking heads saying the same things. Thank you for what you're doing.
You're very welcome. And if you do want any of this information, I'm more than happy to send, David.
Okay.
The more people that take action, the better we'll be.
I agree.
I thank you, and God bless you all.
Okay. 100%. Thank you, Kelly. We'll stay in touch, and might have you on again to comment on something, because I think what you're doing is admirable, and I applaud you for doing it. Thank you so much, and
thank you.
Have a great day out there in the West Coast. I hope to be joining you someday.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It is beautiful, BC, but it's sure not that way lately. Anyway, have a good day, David.
You too, Kelly. Bye for now.
Take good care. Bye-bye.
That was Kellie Auld, and one of my viewers, a supporter, a subscriber. Thank you, Kelly, for reaching out, because I think that was a great conversation. I hope you all enjoyed it. We're just going to have a look at the merchandise here, and I'll be right back with a few concluding remarks.
Who cares?
Thank you again for joining me this morning. And we got lots coming up in the next couple of days. Opening of Parliament is Monday. We're going to be watching those censorship and surveillance bills. We're going to be keeping an eye on the Mark Carney government and everything it's doing to rend this country apart, or tear this country apart and rend it helpless to his authoritarian control. Thanks for watching. I will be back again tomorrow at 10 o'clock with more of the news you need to know. Remember to resolve to resist. Subscribe, share this station with your friends and family. We need your help and support. And thank you. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I am going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Creighton, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.